Hello, I'm Ross Deacon, and welcome to the first ever episode of Word on the Snakevine. Today I have joining me.
Hi, I'm Ed. I'm a herpetologist and I work at Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine.
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm a med student from Switzerland.
And I'm Nick, and I have the best collection of venomous snakes in Europe.
Fuck.
He does think that, to be fair. He does have a lapsoidea, to be fair. The rest of us don't have them. And that does equal cool. So, bit of a hipster collection. But
Well,
we'll talk about
yeah,
that.
if anyone knows what the snake is.
Very, very true. So welcome everybody. This is the first episode. This is the first ever episode. I will spit my words out in a second for you all. It's our first ever episode of Word on the Snakevine, where we are going to try and highlight venomous research being done within the educational and academic fields, as well as trying to highlight different snakebite initiatives around the world. So today we have Ed, Tim, and Nick joining me. Two from Europe, another one from the UK. All with varying differences in collection or working within academia and academic collections. So I think we'll start with Ed, having a quick chat to Ed about what Ed actually does. And so, Ed, you mentioned in your introduction that you work for LSTM. Can you explain a little bit more about LSTM and actually what LSTM is? Because obviously people may not actually understand the abbreviation and what you guys do there.
Yeah, so LSTM is the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. It's the world's oldest tropical medicine school, university, I guess you could call it. And within that, we've got a department for snakebite research. So that's the Centre for Snakebite Research Centre for Snakebite Research and Intervention. So within that, we've been running for over 60 years, I believe it is, working through different kind of snakebite problems and venom research. Currently, we are focused solely on snakebite and the global burden. And I work alongside Paul Rowley as the herpetologist maintaining the collection we've got. So we provide the venom for all our research and all the PhD students and stuff.
So I'd like to just, I think you've just mentioned quite a big name within the herpetological world, Paul Rowley. I think he's pretty well known by a lot of people within the venomous hobby, especially within the UK and Europe. So,
Definitely, yeah.
I think that's quite a cool person to obviously be so closely working with, and obviously he's got 30 plus years of experience of venomous snakes. Is it? I think he said.
He's worked at LSTM for 25 years. I think it's something like he's been around snakes for 50 years. His first snake was like 5 or 6.
Yeah, so
he was an ex-zookeeper for 14 years at Chester Zoo, and then he's been at LSTM for 25, so he's a very well-experienced keeper.
Yeah, definitely, and I think he's probably. I think this is probably a good thing to highlight, even though he's worked with venomous snakes at Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine for 25 years. I think he's got one of the best safety records in the world, I think, for venomous snake extractions. And I think that's something you're all quite proud of at LSTM. Is actually your safety record, isn't it?
The last bite was 16 years ago, which was Paul from Crocus Atrox. But he's been hospitalised 3 times from venomous bites. But it's worth mentioning that there's very few people who've done more extractions than Paul has, and especially over the range of species he's worked with and stuff like extracting from Echis. There's not really anyone else in the world that does it at the same level he does. So how he's managed to keep that safety record, I'll never know. But it's certainly a very impressive one.
As you say, from a species standpoint, at the minute you've got nearly 200 different animals there, and what is that over 50 plus species?
I think we're on 50 species at the moment, but we're getting more later in the year. So we'll expand that, and have more species, new species for both of us to work with, I think.
That'll be quite interesting to see what you guys end up working with over there. I think it could be quite interesting as well from a snake bite research and anti-venom and venom research perspective
Definitely.
of actually what's gonna happen in the future. Because obviously the work you guys are doing now can save any one of our lives on this podcast, plus hope a lot of our listeners' lives as well. So so in the LSTM collection, what are the main species that you're currently looking at? What areas are you focusing on currently, and in the animal collection,
So
as well as the venom research?
our main focus is on sub-Saharan snakebite crisis. That's where we're putting most of our focus now. So we are part of the African Snakebite Research Group, and so the mainstay of this collection has always been Echis ocellatus, because of the sheer number of people they bite and how deadly the bite is. But from that, we've got quite a range of kind of vipers and elapids, a lot of different cobras, especially spitting cobras. They're something that's come up quite a lot, and we're definitely getting more in over the next year because of the bites we're seeing out in the field. The Echis is one of the main focus that we've had at LSTM, developing Echitab G, which is an anti-venom that was designed alongside the Nigerian Ministry of Health and is now used as a cheap, affordable, effective anti-venom. We're working alongside a lot of different manufacturers and lots of collaborations to try and find the most accurate representation data we can get from on the ground locations, and by using that, we're developing a better picture of what the actual snakebite crisis is in Africa.
So is that one of the major
main
problems
goal would be,
with? Sorry, is that one of the major problems that you have? Is that that getting reliable data is quite hard, or?
Yeah. If you look at all different kind of snakebite initiatives, snakebite charities, even the WHO, there isn't one number that is used. It's always a range, and I've seen it range from 20,000 to 140,000 people dying a year. We just don't have accurate representation of the numbers of people who are dying, and that is one of the big problems we're trying to work out. Now, one of the issues from that is people going to faith healers, because a hospital might be 4 hours away. A hospital might not have anti-venom. They might not be able to afford it. So people who die after visiting faith healers, we may never know about, which is something that we're trying to rectify. So while we're focusing on kind of snakebite research and anti-venom research and treatment, we're also doing a lot of education programs, a lot of social. We've recently got a new person joining the department who's doing a lot of focus on kind of the socio-economic cost of snakebite, and they've developed surveys and stuff to distribute into rural Kenya to find out a more accurate representation. And all of this is building a bigger picture of what the actual crisis is and how we can help. Instead of just kind of giving them an antivenom, we can find out where the bites are happening, why they're happening, and instead of people relying on antivenom after a bite, we can educate them saying, keeping your food in your hut at this point of the year on the floor is a bad idea because of rats. Rats bring in snakes, snakes bite. So focusing on education as well as snakebite treatment is something that we're very proud of, and the continuing use of the new data is invaluable for snakebite initiatives all around the world.
No, I agree, and those numbers are just the numbers of snakebite deaths in the year. Just they're high even without thinking they're 40,000, 220,000. Like 40,000's probably a lot of savable deaths there. And it just seems,
yeah, definitely.
seems
I mean,
quite mad.
If you look at India alone, the Indian government has a very low estimate of how many people die. the WHO, I think they estimate about 41 to 48,000 people die a year in India alone from snake bites. So the amount of preventable deaths by having affordable, effective antivenom nearby would be astonishing. But when you're the poorest kind of people in society in the poorest countries in the world, where a vial of antivenom can be $150, you earn $1 a day. It's a life in debt for something you didn't even know going about your daily work. If you've been bitten on the ankle while you're plowing a field, that's your life in debt if you can get to hospital, if you survive the bite, if you aren't permanently maimed. So the repercussions of a bite, not just death, the permanent disfigurement, is shocking. And recently, Venom Day at Bangor University, Dave Williams from the WHO gave a talk. And in that, I think he estimated something like 21% of all the bites in Sri Lanka alone result in PTSD or depression or some sort of mental health issue. So there's a lot more to snakebite than just the physical trauma. There's a lot of mental scarring, and it's something that needs to be focused on, which it now is getting recognition.
And I think that's something that one of the reasons why we all were quite interested in starting this podcast is because there's so much work being done by guys like yourselves, but other smaller institutions as well, and snakebite initiatives around the world that are just not recognised by the everyday venomous keeper. And I think there's a lot to be had between just the everyday venomous keeper knowing what's happening around the world and actually how they can get involved and how they can contribute to some of this work that's being done.
But Ed, maybe you should also talk about what you a post you did in Viper Keepers Forum about keepers being entitled to keeping venomous snakes.
Yeah.
Maybe
this is one of the things. There are kind of hospitals in Kenya that might be allocated 5 vials of antivenom for a whole month. Now, 5 vials of antivenom might not treat one bite. And if you're a doctor in that position of, I've just got a bite in, and it might be a toddler that's screaming after a nitrocollis bite, so screaming in tremendous pain, do you save that one antivenom vial for someone who might come in with a more serious one? There's a lot of this issue. So the NHS stock antivenom for private keepers. Now, that
just so people know, people from the UK will know what the NHS is. It's the National Health Service within the UK. It's who runs our hospital and effectively gives people and residents in the UK free healthcare. Because we're going to talk about another form of healthcare later on in the show with Tim. So just wanted to clarify that. Carry on.
The NHS and Public Health England, they stock antivenom for private keepers and zoo collections. So we have large stores within the NHS across the country in different depots. Say it was Favafruit, which is no longer produced. Those Favafruit boxes that might be expired because they've just been stored by the NHS. Say they've stored 50 of the boxes, and each box contains 10 vials. That's 500 treatments. Now, those 500 treatments could have been used in Africa, but they've been left to expire. So it's this kind of disconnect between private keepers not realizing the impact of snakebite. And I've not got anything against private keepers. I'm friends with all you guys, but there is definitely a disconnect between people seeing a snakebite crisis and
just a bit of ignorance,
Yeah, and the other side of it is a lot of people. I mean, I can say wholeheartedly, when I first started working with venomous, looking back on it now, I was, I don't know the best way to say it. I was not ignorant, but I wasn't aware of the actual dangers. And since starting my job, So I've been at LSTM just over a year now. Since starting my job and having access to the clinical case notes, the papers, the information, and seeing kind of the actual effects of a bite, it's all good seeing as a private keeper, oh, it's a cytotoxic venom. Cytotoxic means nothing. It doesn't tell you about kind of the pain that will be experienced, the sheer damage from kind of cytotoxic elements. It doesn't add the pain levels, the fear, the actual horror of a bite. And there are more documentaries coming out, and it does highlight it. So when people are saying like, oh yeah, I really like to work, I like venomous snakes, I really have a passion for them, I'd love to work with them. Yeah, it's great saying that, but if you don't know the actual effects, so I know a lot of people who have had an atrox bite from a western diamondback will say it was like putting their arm in boiling oil and their bones being ground. Now, no one can really understand that pain until they've experienced it. But then on the other side of it, if you look at some of the documentaries where they've got, say, a 3-4-year-old toddler who's screaming in pain after a bite, whose leg has been eaten away and will be permanently deformed, it definitely changes it, and suddenly there's more of a respect to be had for the sheer power of the animal's venom.
I think I agree. There's probably one of the biggest disconnects is actually the understanding between what private keepers think happens and what actually happens when you get bitten, and actually the effects of different venoms and stuff. And actually, as you say, what we do as private keepers, because obviously talking from a private keeper standpoint here, is actually in a lot of ways from a worldwide snakebite issue, which is an issue. It's nothing else other than that. It's actually it's a crisis. Yeah, it's quite selfish what we do. And
I agree.
And I think it's understanding. I think one of the differences between being a keeper that's doing it because, hey, I want an Atrox, or somebody who's doing it because the love of it and stuff is that understanding and that. That I personally. I always thought that I kept species because I like them. I've got a passion, especially for a couple of the species I keep. I'll admit I've got a very big passion for, but those species aren't involved in the snake in the crisis. Really, they're not the species that's going out biting loads of people. But there is other species that are common in the hobby that are causing these issues, and people just don't. Like it's a bit like, for instance, Melanuca, so forest cobras, for instance, they're heavily involved in this. Nigricollis.
Yeah, and so stuff like your Dendroaspis, your mambas, which I think you guys keep a few. Nick keeps. He's recently got one. So species like these, they're great to keep as pets. Don't get me wrong. I love working with the ones at LSTM. They're an amazing animal. If you want to interact with them, that's the thing. You've got that choice. You have decided the danger is worth it for yourself. Whereas, say you're Joe Bloggs walking down the street and a mamba comes out and bites you. That's none of your choice. That's not you putting yourself in that position. It's forced upon you as such.
I do just want to say though that there's a few myths with mambas, especially polyepsis black mambas, that they will come out and chase you. That is a myth.
I've heard,
that is a myth.
South Africa, I've heard some very interesting ones. Like they'll sit on top of a mountain and wait for you to walk by, and they'll watch you, bite their own tail, and roll down the mountain to bite you. So there is a lot of myths around them. But there is also bites, so there is no smoke without fire, and
definitely,
that's the problem. Trying to get accurate reports of bites, where it's not massively exaggerated, saying, "Oh, this mamba came in, it killed like a family of 20 people and all this." There are cases where it will have happened, where a mamba's come into a house and everyone started freaking out. So the mamba freaks out. As I'm sure if you've worked with a mamba before, it's very easy for them to switch. But it's that
we know,
kind of difference.
With rapids, faster and more panicked you are, faster and more panicked they are. I think that's just
definitely.
And I think that goes to say with these people that just don't know what the snake, not necessarily what the snake is, but what they've just been told these complete and utter lies for years about people's experiences with them. Then all of a sudden they're in the house, or all of a sudden they're walking down the road, or they're in a field and one is around their feet. They panic, they kick out, they try and kill it.
A lot of bites are coming from killing it, that's it. Trying to kill the snake is usually where a bite comes from.
True.
And a lot of the time, trying to dispel these myths is the hardest part. But the problem with dispelling the myths is, you talk to a lot of people in sub-Saharan Africa, and most of them will tell you at least one person they know, maybe themselves, a close relative or a friend, who has been bitten, and likelihood is they probably know someone who died from a snake bite as well. And you've got this kind of never-ending cycle where you're bitten by a snake, so then you go to hospital, but you don't get treatment so you die. But then people say, oh, he died because of this. He died because he didn't go to a faith healer. He died because the hospital couldn't help. So myths are one of the biggest issues we face. Kind of that social learning.
As you say, these people, the reality of it is, and the work. This is why we want people to try with this podcast, to get people like Johan Murray, Mike Parry, and other people that are involved in snakebite around the world, to get them involved in this podcast to educate people, not only in the Western worlds, but hopefully in these places where they have access to Facebook and to podcast streaming services and stuff, and hopefully be able to...
Facebook is one of the best tools out there at the moment. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's it.
We want in social media.
Yeah, we want people.
You look at some of the groups out there. That's it. You look at some of the groups out there, like the Doctors for Snake Bites, where you can post a picture and be like, "Oh, I've just been bitten by this. These are my symptoms," while in hospital, and you can get experts from around the world who are trained in snakebite. One of the other things we face is doctors just don't know what to do because they haven't been trained for it.
But this is the thing: there's no one hard and fast rule on how to treat snakebite, though, is there? There's so many different ways of doing it, and different species will mean that you need different medical care. And this is one of the reasons why we've got Tim involved in this. With Tim's obviously he's involved in the medical side of things, and he can hopefully maybe clarify a few bits and pieces around anatomy and stuff, and how snake bites maybe affect us and stuff like that. And that's I don't think you'll have seen any snake bites since.
No, I have.
At the same time, like not seeing snake bites, it kind of shows I'm not sure what you've been taught for your course, but do you even touch on snake bite normally, or is that kind of something extra you have to do?
Like in my studies?
Yeah.
No, not at all. In Switzerland, we don't have a snakebite problem. We have two venomous species here, and like we're not taught in that at all. We have some toxicology but not like animal venoms or toxins. But in my personally, I'm very interested in venoms, and I'm reading up on clinical reports, and I also been in Thailand, and there I saw some bites. And it's interesting, and that's something I want to do when I'm then a doctor. Finally, I want to be like the person you come to in Switzerland or like internationally for a snake bite. Yeah.
So I think
people like yourselves help, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, they do. And I think Tim just touched on it slightly there, and I think in the Western world, like we sometimes don't necessarily, especially in Europe, don't realise the issues because all our venomous snakes are very populated. There's very small populations of them and pockets of them. We don't come into interactions with them as we've spoken about before, obviously off the podcast, Ed. But we have so small populations and pockets of different Vipera species or different Crotalus species. We never find them we rarely find them within city boundaries or within town boundaries. It's so
they don't interact with people.
They don't. And this is the thing: is what you see
Right.
in the old worlds. This is what you see in Asia, and in a lot of Asia, in a lot of Africa, is that actually snakes have moved into areas where people live, because where people live brings in rodents. It brings in food. They've got houses. They've got for rodents to eat. If rodents are there or other vermin prey item, because we know Dendroaspis mambas will quite happily take stuff like kittens and cats and stuff, and as well as snakes have moved into these areas, and this sort of makes these snake bites issues even bigger, really.
Yeah, that's what shocked me when I was in Thailand. Like, I didn't realize that venomous snakes lived within the city of Bangkok. I was in Bangkok for some weeks, and like in the middle of my stay, I was told that there are Trimeresurus and Kausia everywhere around the city. The problem is that the city was built on the old sewer system. I think, I'm not sure. I was told that, and the sewers are apparently full of reticulated pythons, cobras, and albolabris, Trimeresurus albolabris live in the gardens of the city population.
But that doesn't surprise me at all, because you look at Hong Kong. Hong Kong is another big example of that. It's been built on a sewage system, and all the storm drains and stuff around there, they all have Naya, Atra in there, Chinese cobras in are regularly found, Burmese pythons are regularly found, lots of Dengadax, I can't even spit my words out now. Dian eggs of quite 100 paces are found there. Like, there's loads of different species that are found in the storm drains there, and so you could be walking down the street, and then the next thing is that there's a cobra by the side of you. What do these people do? They panic. They try and kill it. They take the shoe off and they try and hit it with their shoe, or they try and pick it up because they don't know what it is. And this is where these issues come from. And I think we just don't fully understand what the crisis is as private keepers, as a private collection. I'll fully admit, until I started talking to you guys about this, I didn't have a clue what this was all about. I didn't, and I think I'm quite a competent person, and my knowledge is quite vast on a lot of things within herpiculture, within herpetology. I'm not an expert on anything, but I feel like I have at least a bit of an understanding. But this, I just didn't even know it was. I knew that there was loads of snakebite deaths a year. I didn't realise how big and widespread these issues were. I'll hold my hands up and say that. And talking to you guys has really kind of brought that forward, and that's obviously this podcast, especially for me. This what this podcast is about. I want to highlight this. I want to highlight the work everybody's doing, and kind of highlight the issues and the snakebite initiatives, so people realise that when they choose to have a western diamondback or a monocle cobra or whatever they decide that they want, that could have a knock-on effect to the people within the regions of where that animal comes from. It could be impacting. They could be impacting snake bites, because if they get bitten, the 10 vials of antivenom that they have, would that 10 vials of antivenom need to be there if they didn't have that cobra, or if people within where they lived didn't have venomous snakes, and the antivenom was where it needed to be to save somebody's life. It's
certainly in the UK. That is one of the big things in the UK. the UK has no need for antivenom beyond Zip-Virus. We just don't have them. So the private keeping is the reason the antivenom is in the UK. We have stores of expired antivenom at LSTM, which we use in our own research. But even those stores of expired antivenoms, they are precious. So when Professor Harrison, the head of my department, went out to Kenya recently, he took the Favafreak that we had. We had 2 boxes of 2016 expired Favafreak. He took them with him because it's so precious over there. Even expired antivenom is usable.
Yeah, it still works.
To them, it's like an expiry date doesn't mean anything if it means that liquid in that vial will save your life.
As you say, you may get worse. You may end up with a slightly worse serum sickness, but like if that's your life, would you rather itchy all over and be alive, or would you rather be dead because nobody supplied that antivenom for you?
Have access. Yeah.
It's a simple question.
To this. After his Crotalus atrox bite, he had 26 vials of expired Crofal, I think, because there was a private keeper who'd had 3 bites in 18 months or something and used stores. So he had to have 26 vials of Crofab, but they were expired. And the serum sickness, it was hell for him, and I'm sure he can tell you about it if he ever comes on. The expired antivenom, it worked, but serum sickness also increased. And that trade-off, you might feel a bit crap, but you're alive.
Life is always worth more. In my view, life is always worth more. And the person who's been bitten is always going to probably agree with that statement as well. Like if I was ever bitten, if I was ever bitten and my only option was antivenom, then of course I wouldn't hesitate one bit to go, no, just do it, because I'd rather be around for my family.
You can treat the symptoms. You can treat the after effects.
Death is so final, and life is full of possibilities.
It's true.
There we go. Nice and positive.
And I think this actually moves us on to a little bit, because obviously we've mentioned a little bit how the UK works for antivenom, and I think from what I understand, the Netherlands is quite similar, isn't it, Nick? From an antivenom standpoint, you have a few different stores within your health service there, and that allows you to, if you were to be bitten, the antivenom would come from there.
Yeah, it's supplied from there, if there's demand for it. But the availability differs, of course.
Yeah, that's the same, isn't it, wherever you are? But I do know that one thing that Tim is actually involved with as well is that in Switzerland there is a different method of how antivenom is kept, and it's actually I'll let you talk a little bit more about it, Tim. I think you can obviously explain it a lot better than I can. But I'll let you go, because I think that'll be the easiest way.
Okay, fine. So in Switzerland, it's organized like this: you are required by law to have access to have antivenom in stock for species that have antivenom. I said a lot of have. So if there is an antivenom produced for a species and you want to keep that species, you need to have that antivenom. Or you need to have access to that antivenom through an association, and that's what we have. We have like a mixed system in Switzerland. There are state supplies in Zurich or in Geneva from the government. I think I can say it like that. And there is a private association that I'm part of, and that are most venomous keepers in the eastern Switzerland, in the German part of Switzerland, are part of. I don't know what it's called in English. I would just refer to it as the Anti-Venom Storage Association, right? Let's call it that. It's a private association my predecessors in venomous keeping founded. It's not that old. It was founded in 2002. I looked it up especially for that podcast. And the reason why they founded it is exactly for the reason of antivenom availability. So the national storages in Zurich or Geneva, they have a big variety of antivenoms. So they even have boomslang antivenom, and they have all kinds of South American antivenoms. But the quantity and some Australian antivenoms maybe were lacking. So the people thought, let's join all together, put in some money each, and then let's buy those antivenoms for ourselves. And that's exactly what they did, and what is today the Anti-Venom Storage Association. And basically, we're just some private keepers who each pay a little amount of money for the president to buy antivenoms. So we have a huge variety. We have Australian antivenoms, we have Thai antivenoms, we have for the 100 pacer antivenoms, we have South African polyvalent. Yeah, and I think I drifted off.
So from what you were saying about kind of how it happens in Switzerland, it seems like the private keepers have a lot more responsibility for their antivenoms for their own species, whereas kind of here in the UK, private keepers aren't really aware of where the antivenom's stored. They aren't aware of what kind of antivenoms are stored. So some of the species that you might think, oh, it might be one brand, it might be another, but that's all confidential information from the NHS, and it could be an issue for private keepers.
No, we
they
don't
aren't really too sure.
But that's the
thing. You don't know.
So, like, I go to Paul, and
I
go to Paul, and I know Paul's not allowed to, legally not allowed to say, yes, we've got this much in stock, or we've got this, that, and the other. Yes. So, because it's all confidential. So, but we are allowed. Paul is allowed to advise us. Say, like, when I got my Rinkhals, I asked Paul, is there antivenom in stock for Rinkhals in the UK? And his words were, I can't. It's been a while now, but it was no, we don't have that in stock in the UK. But that's but that was one thing. But then I asked about South African polyvalent, and in other words, for different species that I was keeping at the time, and he said, yeah, we've got antivenom for that. So he can say, do we have it? Yes or no. He just can't tell us what we've got, how much we've got of it,
where it is.
But that's all like you can all look it up online, right? You have the antivenom codes, and you can check.
No, not in the UK.
No,
not in the UK.
So the thing is, we have access to LSTM purely because of the snakes we keep. We need to know that we've got antivenom provided in the event of a bite. So we've all got antivenom labels. But up until recently, only Rob had access to it, and David Alou, who's now the director of LSTM. It's highly confidential material, and if you're a private keeper, and this is going to sound a bit big-headed, but you haven't got kind of the luck to be in contact with someone like Paul or myself, you just won't know unless someone else has been bitten and tells you.
But this is the thing that Paul has done for such a long time for the UK, and lots of older generation keepers in the UK, maybe people like myself who's got an interest in it and stuff, new keepers, but we will go to Paul, and now me personally will go to yourself, with being a friend, close friend, that we will go to you guys and we will say, we're getting this, what's the lie of the land, antivenom wise? Do we have it, yes or no? Because I think from as much as we look at it in the UK, if there's antivenom in the UK for a species, we're not a very big place in reality. We're not big.
It should be in Scotland, and you could be in the south of England, but it means it's still in country and it can be flown over.
It can be airlifted to you. You're going to get it within a couple of hours, and within that couple of hours, you're going to have palliative care to keep you comfortable maybe not out of pain, but keep you alive until the antivenom is there to treat you correctly.
Basically,
Yeah.
And then you can commence treatment. And even within that, bites within the UK, the likelihood is they'll get in contact with maybe LFTM, maybe with Professor Lalou, maybe with David Worrell, Professor David Worrell. There is a network within the UK. So one of the things Paul has faced recently is the NHS don't want us to be giving out advice, and that's completely fair. Neither Paul and I are trained medics, and we always say, if someone contacts us about a bite, especially Paul, we aren't medics, we can't give medical advice. We can put you in contact with the right people.
Yeah,
coming to us for help, legally, we cannot do anything. The NHS have said to Paul before, Public Health England have said, he's not allowed to be involved. And a lot of people use, on old protocols, had Paul's number.
Well, look, I have Paul's number saved in my phone, so if I was to get bitten, phone for an ambulance, phone the poison centre, and then phone Paul.
So we've had people call Paul before calling an ambulance, before calling the poison centre, and that's the problem. There's kind of a disconnect in protocols, and I've seen a fair few people say that they use, for example, the Miami Snake Health. I can never remember the name of the place. They use established facilities in, say, America.
Florida Snakebite
protocols themselves. That's the one.
So I have the full. Joe Pittman, who produces them, who is a snakebite, as a snake switch, with a specialism in snake bites, obviously in Florida, quite a lot of snake bites in Florida, and we will try and get him on, but I have his snake bite. And from reading them and looking at them, they have a lot of the numbers on them to contact and stuff, and a lot are right. But if you followed them, again, you'd probably end up phoning Paul. Paul can't give medical advice. It's not his job to give medical advice. He's got a lot of knowledge from the job that he is in, but it's not his job to be telling a doctor how to treat somebody with a snake bite. That's why you need to get in contact with people like Professor Worrell and people like that who, or if it's especially if it's a South African or Southern African species of snake, like Arno Nord and people like that that their career has been built on snake bite treatment around the world, not just in their native countries but around the world. And that you say these pages that are on these groups that are on Facebook that people go, I've been bitten by a snake. These are my symptoms. What do we do? They're great. They are great for that, but they're not in responses that people want and need in those situations. Which, as you say, well, some of these
they're great. Yeah, they're fantastic for an extra resource, for a second opinion, for the clinicians to discuss possibilities. So there's a complication, and you've got basic snakebite training, and suddenly something you've never seen before, you go and join this group, and you're in the group, and you say, I've got this. You'll get immediate responses from people around the world who are trained in snakebite, and they can discuss it through with you. It's the same as the NHS. They'll contact Talkspace. Talkspace will then discuss it with everyone. So if it's an atypical bite, they'll get in contact with David Lalou. They might get in contact with David Worrell. They'll get in contact with the right people. That's something that the resource is there. But the main priority is always just get to the hospital first. The hospital can deal with whatever complications you come up with. But if you're spending time calling Paul up at 2 a.m. saying, I've just been bitten, you're wasting precious time. And I'm sure it happens in other countries with, I'm sure Tim and Nick can kind of say there are big names in that country that people might go to. But the priority is always priority is always get yourself to hospital first. And
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, LSTM, we're very lucky because we've got a minute walk from the Royal Liverpool Hospital. So for us, if we're bitten, it's very easy for us to get to hospital. And we're well aware of the doctors about.
The same for me, and I think that's something that people need to look at as well, where they are and where they are in the system and
where are they going?
They live. Where do they live compared to the nearest hospital, especially in countries like
where
America,
will they end up? Oh yeah, definitely.
America, where you could be 50, 60, 70, 80, 100, 200 miles from the nearest actual hospital that can treat you.
But that's why I think that it's important for you to know where your antivenom is stored. So that's why I don't understand why the UK won't give out the location or quantities of antivenom.
It's to do with the NHS and kind of hierarchy, and because it's not owned by a private keeper and stuff. It's part of the NHS confidentiality and stuff. It definitely goes a lot deeper than I've just explained.
Yeah.
From what I know, that's kind of it. But
problematic. Like I know exactly how much antivenom is stored where. Like my next hospital is 10 minutes away, and I know that almost all the antivenom of the Anti-Venom Storage Association is stored there. So if I get bit by a bothrops, I know that the antivenom is waiting for me 10 minutes away. And that's
big damage even
you already know more than I do.
Yeah. In the Netherlands, it's a bit different. You know, you can most of the data surrounding the antivenom in stock are a bit out of date. So you're always a bit, you know, you don't know exactly how much there is. You can call them, but it's never guaranteed that they have it around for the next couple of days or a week or something.
Maybe you get some from Germany?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
that's
you're quite lucky.
But I believe that Germany has the same instance like Switzerland.
Yeah.
As a backup in the sense that some keepers pay a yearly annual fee to have some antivenom in stock.
Yeah, it is.
And I would, and in the UK, if that was an option to me in the UK, I would pay the money to ensure that if I was bitten, I would have a better chance of survival. If I knew that the antivenom stock for the species I was keeping, I'd be more than happy to pay for that.
Yeah, me as well. You know, it's a bit of, you know,
it's a peace of mind. I mean, I have access to the information in the UK, but I couldn't tell you anything. I couldn't tell you stocking levels because I don't know them. I just have access to the information at one point. Even then, it's not easy to get access to it. So for me, maybe I'm in a position, but most private keepers, they'll have no clue where the nearest kind of storage is, the nearest hospital that will be able to treat them. So here in the Swiss side of how it's done, and the same with kind of the Dutch side, it's a lot more responsibility on the keepers to be knowledgeable, which is refreshing to hear, if anything.
And I know, and this is the thing, is like, especially like for people who don't know, because we'll swap this, we're going to swap the conversation slightly because of the time podcast and whatnot. So we're going to swap this from the anti-venom to kind of the private keeping and the private keeping laws in the countries that we live in. But like in the UK, we have to have a dangerous wild animals licence, as most of you will know, which is an inspection by a council member and a vet who will basically say, are you safe for the public to keep venomous snakes? Not are you safe for the keeper, it's basically are you safe for the public? And that will give you the licence. There's nothing about antivenom in there whatsoever. There's nothing about past experience. And this is where I think a lot of the maybe disconnect between some of the older keepers and some of the newer keepers, younger keepers in the UK especially comes from, is the fact that new keepers in the UK will do stuff like handling courses at Wrigley's Pet Shop or the House of Venom or Exo Teaching Burger Head. They'll do courses rather than getting a mentor, and because people in the UK seem to be quite scared about mentoring in general.
And Holland as well.
Yeah, and I think it's quite so that, and because of that, people are going into getting DWAs without really understanding what the implications of a snake bite are, because nobody's telling them or nobody's pointing them in the right direction, or people that maybe don't have the necessarily.
Why they do DWA training.
No, that's it. So this is what.
So you're not going to tell them just before you start handling. Oh, this is what could happen to you.
Yeah, you're not going to, because it's going to sap their confidence or make them scared. When that's the worst, as we'll all admit, that's probably one of the worst things you can be, is scared when you're in these situations. There's going to be times. There's going to be times where you think to yourself, "Oh God, that was a bit closer than I like to admit." But you don't want to go into handling of some of these species, especially some of the species like you've got. You three keep, especially compared to what I keep relatively low-end stuff compared to you guys. But you don't want to be thinking to yourself, "Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God," before you even get the Viv open, for the terrarium open, for door open for a Dendroaspis or a Oxyanis or something, or for a Taipan, do you? You don't want it, or a Bothrops even. You don't want to be thinking that. You don't want a Nia Melanuka signing the Viv open for a Subvulva and thinking to yourself, "Oh God, why have I done that?" Like, you don't.
Yeah.
You can't be scared.
You have to be confident.
Yeah, you have to be confident.
You have to have that confidence.
And that's something.
Even if you're not feeling it, you've got to have that confidence in your own skills.
But that's something the DWA, in the UK, the DWA doesn't cover. It doesn't cover that experience to say that. Yeah, I get it. People like the big fast species, the species that. Actually, if we all stop and think about it, we'd all probably go actually for captivity. They're not ideal.
No,
especially from a bite situation. If you were bitten by a Dendroaspis, like, or an Oxyanis, or even a Bothrops, like, reality, if it's a big Bothrops, like, for instance, Tim, what's your Mugenai 1.6 meters bigger?
1.7, yeah, like that.
Like the venom,
that's huge.
The venom yield on those animals alone is going to be huge. Like,
definitely,
you're gonna be in trouble before you, like, pretty quickly. And the same with like some of the size of the yields on some of the Dendroaspis species don't need big yields, and obviously Oxyanis species don't need big yields. And
going over to spitters.
But that's a bad situation anyway, because I live quite a long distance from the best specialized venom treating hospital in the Netherlands. I live around 2 hours from it, and at the distribution center for the venom, that's also like 2 hours, 2.5. I don't live very strategically, so I need to always be on guard.
And I think this is the thing, is that people, when they get into venomous, they do. Sometimes people are doing it for the wrong thing.
Not sometimes, nearly always.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. But there's people in whatever country you live in and stuff, and maybe people think that about me in the UK, but are doing it for certain reasons, that are doing it to show off because they think it's cool. Or I hope people don't think that about me, but I could see why people would, keeping venomous reptiles at the end of the day. But people just don't think about this type of stuff when they get into it. And that's one thing with like the license in Switzerland, as Tim said when he was talking about how Switzerland do it, is that it states that you have to effectively have access to anti-venom for the species you're keeping. I think that kind of drives a bit of a culture within the venomous keeping there to be a bit more responsible and stuff. And obviously their licensing system seems quite different to the UK, for instance, is kind of, it'd probably be best to ask Tim to explain a little bit more about it, really, to be honest.
You said in the UK, two people are coming to control your bits, or that you're not a threat to the public, right?
Yeah, so in the UK, it's to check that your room is like escape-proof, your vibs are escape-proof, so basically to protect the general public.
Yeah. So in Switzerland, I wouldn't say it's similar. It's a bit different. So the process is a little bit different. First, you absolve a course like one afternoon, and after that you have the permission to go to the veterinary office and ask for the permission to have venomous snakes. And after that, the veterinary will come to you and check your vib and your room. And it's also similar to what you said about Great Britain. The veterinary will look at the terrarium and say it's suited for that species you applied for, or it's not that suited, and also look at the room. Like if you're in a wait a minute.
I think we've lost him.
Yeah, no, I was distracted. Sorry, where was I?
Did one of your moods tonight finally move?
No.
So basically what I was saying, the veterinary just checked that you're safe and that the snake is safe. But it's kind of a lush process, so you don't have to be that big of an expert to get a cobra in Switzerland. Like I just made it sound, it's really easy to get a venomous snake in Switzerland.
Don't say that.
Don't get a cobra.
Don't get a cobra.
We like
Cobra's scary, man. You know, why would you keep it?
Actually, I got something to add. Switzerland has 26 cantons, like regions, and those are all those have all different rules. So, like in one canton, you have to keep, I would put it, easy species first before you can get a cobra. So it's a bit an arbitrary law, but yeah, what can you do?
To be fair, it's showing. Sometimes these licenses just show a responsibility to be able to basically show that you're a responsible person. I think a lot of it is common sense.
Yeah. If you apply for DWA and you say you put on, I want to keep forest cobra, I want to keep mambas, I want to keep taipan, I want to keep death adders, you just basically looked at the top 10 deadliest, then yeah, you're going to stand out as this guy's just doing it for owning the deadliest snakes.
Yeah.
But kind of starting off with that, right, you need to keep a simpler species. If you've got the dedication, if you've got the passion, and you want to do it as a proper hobby, you'll do it.
Yeah.
You might not overly want to,
And some of
it kind of weans out those people.
There's some of these species that everybody says they're easier, they're beginners venomous and stuff like that. Like a spidilaps, for instance. You could probably even put a lapsoidea in there and stuff. But a lot of these species that people would class as that, are actually really interesting species to keep as well. They're not, like some of the bigger, faster,
but
top 10.
But a lot of those species, like Atrox and Nyagovia, are kept by people who are not truly motivated, and they leave the hobby in 2 or 3 years, and they're just done with it.
Yeah, they ended up with a viper that just sits there and does nothing.
Yeah, no, sometimes Tim likes that, so, but some of us, some people, are okay with that, and that's the level that they want to be. Some people love monocle cobras, Cathia, they absolutely love them, because they come in, if you're into the morph craze, every colour under the sun. And that's £6. And that's okay. If that's what you're interested in, that's okay. And they're great, and actually they are great captive species, but they are usually very poorly kept. And people then complain, oh, my monocle cobra doesn't do anything because you keep it in a drawer with no light, hardly any decent substrate, so of course it's going to be boring.
No,
what do you expect?
What they say is that my monocle cobra isn't doing well, but the houseband is spot on. So what am I doing wrong?
Or another one, my cobra doesn't hood. Cobras, after the thing is we all know Naya, after a certain amount of time, certain species of Naya, they will just become more sedate and more mellow because they get to know that you're not a threat. So they just don't hood, they just don't see you as a threat anymore, so they don't need to show a defensive display.
That's not
too much.
We all ended up talking
like
about
it. Like we're saying, Nayas get used. Like,
as you say, from an STM perspective, a lot of your Naya species, your cobra species, are really quite sedate for animals that are sometimes going through quite highly stressful, invasive procedures. Milking, unfortunately, is stressful for an animal. Is more stressful for an animal than it's probably not as stressful as people think it is. It is more stressful than for an animal that's not being milked, for instance. But because of the way you guys keep them, because of the way that you guys have kept them, and like the work Paul has done over the years, where Paul's a big advocate. When I was there, obviously I came and visited on Friday, and Paul instantly said, just like, we don't work fast here, we work safe. And because of that, the cobras get to know that actually you're not going to poke and prod them, you're not going to pin them to the floor. Paul and yourself, like, I saw both of you handle while you were there. You're both dead steady, you're both really precise with what you're doing, so you're taking your time, you're just enjoying the animal being there, the animal's not stressed because you're there, and you get your work done. And because of that, it makes actually your job a lot quicker, because you haven't got a forest cobra flying around the room, or you haven't got a black mamba, you haven't got Frank bombing out of his vid every single time the door opened.
Yeah, Frank's too lately, that's the problem.
They're just, this is the thing, is they just got used to it, and that's the same for any species. Like people always, they moan,
just to add on to your point just there, the majority of our species are all wild caught. And speaking with kind of Nick and Tim and that, when I've said about our Nigricollis, most of ours don't spit, especially our Tanzanian. Like, you can do a whole box change. Move them from one box to another, just stir them out of the hive, put them in, there's no hooding, there's no spitting, they're just kind of like, oh, alright, I'll carry on. And I know that a lot of other people with Nigricollis have had experiences where they're just a little ball of anger. Now,
well, didn't you get rid of yours, Nick? Because of that. Oh, Nick's gone.
Nick's gone? No,
I'm not gone.
No, you're not gone. It's just on mute. Yeah, just saying, didn't you get rid of your Nigricollis? Because the experiences you totally different to Ed. Like, it was a ball of anger, it spat a lot and that. And
it was just not fun to keep. And I got it at a time where I was maybe a bit too. It was just a step too far because it was wild caught. There was also a chance that I had to treat it, and it was just a ball of anger, 7 foot long, very fast, very strong, and very nervous.
They are.
A lot of cobra species are really confident, but Nigricollis just, whenever I would enter the room, it was in a cage, it wouldn't face the door I would enter into. But it was, when I opened the door, it was just, I would hear a thud, and then it would just be in the high walls, because it heard me coming in. It was just that stressed out, and it never got better. It spat infinite amounts of venom, it shed, it shit or shed, The whole walls of the enclosure under, it wasn't fun and it wasn't a good time. It just, but captive rats, nigricollis are a lot better, in my opinion.
So it's saying, like, from your experiences to Ed's experiences with obviously LSTM have got a lot of nigricollis from a lot of different localities and their nigricollis is, even though they're wild caught, again, they've just got a completely different experience to you. I think this is the thing, is that people think that a cobra should hood at every opportunity.
Yeah.
And actually, in reality, they're only going to hood as a defensive posture.
And that means they're stressed.
Yeah, it does. And the people who go, oh, I'm getting rid of this because it doesn't really hood, like, they're not the right kind of people that should be having these things. Really, if you think
they're the kind of guys who are in it because they don't have any fascination or passion for the hobby in general. You know, I have a passion for exotic species in general, but it just so happens that I find snakes, and in that regard, venomous snakes, the most interesting to keep. But I like them all, and there's a lot of people who are attracted to this hobby. Or people who only know the big names, you know, Nyagrufia, Naya siamensis, Crotalus atrox, Trimerosaurus abrolabris, and they're just not, you know, they don't even know how many species there are in the cobra genus, the Naya genus, you know.
no,
There's a lot more to it.
there is a lot more to it.
Yeah.
And going back to nigricollis, there's two Nigerian nigricollis that we've got wild caught, and they're so inquisitive. So as Nick was saying, like, as soon as he walked in the room, they'd be hiding, you know, really nervous. There's two that will sit out for most of the day, and I can go up to the glass, not tapping on the glass, but kind of running my finger over it. The snake doesn't hood. It just follows my finger. It's very inquisitive for me. And I prefer that, personally. I think that's an amazing example of a snake, to see its behaviour when it's not stressed.
Yeah.
Snakes is completely different.
And this is why I like Thermophoridae as a family of snakes, and this is why I love Malpolon, is that they've got that inquisitiveness, that they are out all the time, they're looking around, they're trying to figure out their environment, they're trying to figure out all the enrichment that you get them, they're trying to figure, they're constantly interactive, they're constantly trying to do things, and that to me, that's what captive keeping should be about. You should be replicating what they're doing, they've got in the wild, so that you can see that behaviour in your own home. That's what you should be keeping for. The reason why I think that's another reason why I've asked you guys to come and do this podcast with me. I think you've all got very similar views to me as regards to captive keeping.
Yeah.
And actually, what the fun of captive keeping and that is. And I think we all agree with that. A lot of it for us is. A lot of it for me, private keeping for me is seeing a wild animal in my own home, not seeing a captive animal that's stressed, and that is it.
A stressed animal is not enjoyable.
No, it's not at all.
That's how I see it.
Yeah.
So we've got a forest cobra that as soon as you walk into the room, if it's out, it will hood, it will strike the glass. It's not nice.
No.
We've got covered up because as soon as you walk by it, it will strike 4 or 5 times. It's a big impressive animal.
Did you just say that the puff adder? The Aratans that you've got covered up.
Yeah.
Holy moly, that is the biggest bittis I've ever in my life.
Really?
Oh yeah. Like, it's a monster. Absolute monster. It is huge.
Nice.
You'd be very, very impressed. You'd be very, very, very impressed.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. A good bitties, you know.
So, yeah.
It's a good fit, it's that one. It's a prime example of, I was doing a box change on it the other day and I hooked it and I knew it was going to be an absolute pain to hook. I knew it. So I had the python hook ready. We got a big python hook for the bigger bitches and the Crotalus. And I used my normal hook, got it under the snake's spine. As soon as I went to lift it, the bitters just turned and climbed up the hook, striking towards me. Horrible. A perfect example of a bitter, but horrible.
Yeah, yeah.
And for me, I don't enjoy keeping that snake. It's a stressed out snake. And for me, it's not enjoyable. I don't like working on it simply because it's not fun for either of us.
Yeah.
It's not behaving naturally. That's the same with my Sumatra, in a sense.
It's just a snake that's not behaving naturally and it's stressed. It's just, it sometimes is, as you said earlier with the necrocollis, sometimes if you can't keep it so that it's not stressed, it's worth moving it on to somebody else to try and do it. Because at the end of the day, well, you're going to shorten that the lifespan of that animal. Maybe, well, there's evidence to show that you would, and it's kind of sometimes just worth being able to admit defeat and kind of go, oh, I'm not enjoying it, or it's just not, that animal's obviously not happy, and just going, actually, it needs to be moved to somebody who can make it happy. Who can give it what it's needed.
Yeah, but there's also a bit, like sometimes a species is not for you what you thought it would be.
No,
I just don't feel any affection for that Sumatrana. So it's just, and also it's not fun to keep. So then I'm like, in this trade I get some Lapsodeas in the valley, and I'm just a lot more fond of them. So it's for me it's a decent trade.
I had the same experience with my Atropoides mexicanus, right? I love South American landsets, and I thought that would be a great species to keep. And as soon as I got it, it was already a little bit sickly, but Atropoides don't move in general, so even healthy specimens don't move. So I kind of lost my joy for Atropoides as the whole genus. Kind of ruined it for me.
Yeah.
So I've got kind of a similar experience, obviously, with some Naya species like Naya nubia. I got that, I really enjoyed them, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what changed, but I just got fed up of being covered. Well, I maybe started showing some signs of maybe a slight venom allergy. I got some venom on my hand. I got a bit of a rash. I just enjoying being covered in venom all the time. I just thought it was. Every time I interacted with them, they're obviously stressed to be spitting at me so much.
Were they wild caught or captive bred?
They were captive bred by London Zoo, I believe. A lot of them in Europe are from that original London Zoo breeding, but still they were very flighty.
As well.
Yeah, a lot of them are very spitty, but. Like I've got the Empheze now, and I genuinely, I love that thing. It doesn't really spit. Like a couple of people have said that the fire hoses. It spat once at me, and that's when I first they spat once at me because I've obviously got the pair. Only one spat at me, and it only spat at me when I unboxed it from getting it back, and obviously that was a bit of a nightmare journey back from Germany.
Yeah, I was really worried.
Yeah, I was really worried. So obviously they were stressed, and then since that they've not even lifted a lip. They've got no interest. Dead interest, really no interest whatsoever in spitting at me. Dead interest in snakes. They're just constantly on the go. They constantly bask out. They fan the hood out for basking. They don't really hood anymore when I get them out, and that's all very quick that they've changed that, but they just look fantastic. They just do it. Then obviously you've got other species like Pallida, and obviously as we were saying, Negricollis and stuff, that they never seem to. Nubia is another. They don't seem to get rid of the spitting habit. They just spit forevermore, and
the interesting thing is that it's either black or white. Either they never calm down and they spit a lot, or they acclimate really well, or they establish really well, and they are basically garter snakes, for example.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there does seem to be a
They do
difference
calm down.
between wild caught, especially in the snakes that are in the hobby. I'm not saying what's the LSTM, because I think what you've got there is it can be very different in a lot of ways, as you'll admit. But I think
Yeah.
in the hobby, what you see the difference between a wild caught and a captive bred snake behaviourally from a captive keeping standpoint is it can be massive. It can be really big. But then, as you say, it can still be very black and white. It can still be very, very spitty still. And I do think to myself, what would
saying
life...
that, though, within our collection at LSTM, one of the worst cobras we've got, like, if we exclude the forest cobras simply because it's forest cobras and it doesn't count, because they are something
They are
else.
what they are, aren't they?
Yeah, they've got their own leagues. That's just established.
Yeah.
Probably the worst cobra that we've got to handle is our captive bred Philippinensis. That thing is.
I understand. I
vocal.
can imagine that.
When you showed me it and you were like, oh, this is where we got some spitters. These are Nubia, these are Mozambica.
Everything's hidden away.
There's our Macatus. Then all you heard was just a thud. It went, oh yeah, that's a Philippensis down there where it smashed into the side of the tub. Well, obviously, it's not a very... It just charged the tub.
It's captive bred.
And it's the same with the Atra as well, isn't the Atra captive bred as well? And you were like, oh, here's a Naya, here's some Naya Haji, oh, and here's the dunk as it hits the side of the tub. There's another
the Atra, all you've got to do is, if the Atra's in its rack, if you pull the box forward an inch, the Atra will be coming out and it charges and duffers straight into the front of the box, and then just really kind of working out what's happened. It's never aggressive, it doesn't hood.
It doesn't. It's not mouth's not open when it does it. It's like oh. It's just kind of a startled kind of I've got to get away. Maybe it's like I've got to get away thing. I maybe don't know what exactly it is, but
I mean, if it's feeding day, it's something else. That then becomes one of the worst cobras to work with as a feeding day. But it looks happiest when it's got a mouth in its mouth. Genuinely, if you ever see a cobra and you think it looks happy, that Atra with a mouth in its mouth is the happiest thing you'll ever see. But when it's not eating, even just moving the box slightly, it comes out. It needs to see what's happening. I don't always know if it's an escape kind of idea, because it leaves the hide and it kind of stays at the front of the box, almost nose rubbing to get closer. It's a bit of a weird one. But when you do husbandry on it, you open that box lid, it won't fly out the box, it just sits there. So the movement between kind of opening the lid beforehand is going crazy in the box. You're like, oh great, it's going to try and escape. You open the lid and it just sits there. So it's a very peculiar snake, but it's a captive bred compared to the wild caughts that we've got that don't do that. I think we're quite different at LSTM, and it's not something that a lot of people can relate with because of the setup we've got.
Well, my Atra are different to that. They're very flighty, but they're not. They won't come towards me, or they won't come towards where I am or anything like that. Instantly, they just look to. They don't really hood that much anymore either. They just look to. Maybe it's the interactions I have with them. Again, I'm very much out into the holding tub, sort the enclosure out, animal back in. I want an animal out and back in within 2 or 3 minutes. I don't want it being stressed. I've got everything ready to go. The animal comes out, gets put in the holding bin, the enclosure's sorted, and the animal's back in the bin, back in the enclosure as quick as possible. I don't want the interaction with it outside. Yeah, so maybe that's why.
We typically have a fresh box ready. Yeah. So for us, the interaction is literally move it and close the lid.
Yeah,
that's the main interaction with us.
Yeah, well, my Atra is the same as well. Like my Atra, they don't hood, they don't do anything. They just turn and go. And like I'm really I wanted for a while, but then I kind of taught myself out of having them. And then when I turned these came available, I was kind of like, actually, let's have some. Let's have a go with them. Let's keep them. And I'm glad I did because I'm really enjoying them. Again, they're just a species that they're quite widely kept. They go for quite cheap, but really enjoyable captives. So yeah,
Definitely, yeah.
yeah, I'd say as a whole, I think between us all, we've all probably got sort of quite a diverse collection, really, of quite unusual animals. I think.
I mean, even kicking the snakes we've got out, LSTM out, simply because we are a research centre. Between the three of you, you have a hell of a collection to the point that most of the species we've got at LSTM, at least one of you's got or has had.
Well, that's
We've
also big
got a kind of special one.
Yeah, that's. Well, you've got one special. None of us have had Walter Nasira. I've said that wrong.
Waltonisia, Waltonisia.
Waltonisia.
That's how I know it.
I don't know.
Waltonisia.
Waltonisia gives you, yeah.
But that's only because the guy who was wanted to sell them to us was asking $1,500 for a pair. You know?
Yeah, I'm not paying that. I really, after seeing Liverpool's, I really, really want them though. They are really cool.
They are great.
It's really, really
They
cool.
are fantastic. I love working with ours.
But they're just such a little beast. But yeah.
Oh, they really are.
As you say, like we've got, even though you've got some rare snakes at LSTM, to be fair, you have got some rare snakes that,
Yeah.
and it's maybe you've got some common snakes, but you've got rare localities of those common snakes. And
Or
so, and I think we could
multiple
probably,
localities or something like that,
yeah, I think we could probably just have an episode in future weeks. We'll probably just do an episode purely on the snakes that LSTM have got and some of the localities that they've got, because you've just got so many and so many different things.
It will be a 6-hour episode.
Yeah, I know. Like, Tim will be involved because there's loads of bitties in there, so Tim would like that one. But
Tim loves his bits, yeah.
yeah, so would probably be okay there. But like, you've got a lot of different localities of the same animals. Like a lot of localities just aren't in the trade, like Nigerian aratans, like Nigerian puff adders that are I just can't believe
They're
how
a bit
big.
boring, to be honest. Like, I mean, yeah, they do get big, and compared to,
Like
they're a bit boring.
everybody's like, oh, the Kenyan, like Lake Nakuru puff adders are small. They're small.
I prefer Tanzanian.
They're nowhere near as small as what
you
people
saw our big one.
keep saying. Like you've got a Lake
You saw our
Nakuru
big
that's
Kenyan.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got 4 Lake Nakurus, and 1 is big and 3 are small.
Yeah.
The small ones are worse.
What is small?
Very small. I'll
yeah.
get you a picture.
Yeah, they're very small compared to the big one. They're still not tiny.
But that's the same with British eritreans from from Namibia. You know, some people keep a sort of sub-locality that grows to 5 foot, 6 foot. But then there's a guy in the Netherlands who bred them, and they're like 2 foot, 2.5, 70 centimeters.
I mean,
I think that there's going to be, from all accounts of speaking to people, Bittis aritans is not going to be Bittis aritans forever. There's so much difference. They're not one species. And it's just until the taxonomist.
And then suddenly
Even the
they
venom
get
competition.
like a huge popularity boost, and then they're like worth 10 times more than they are now. You know, like Melanoleuc got a boost when they got divided into multiple species.
Yeah, it did, yeah. But this is the thing, is it's just going to be so. But as you say, like with the aritans, like it's obvious when even you look at your facility, the head shape's different. Obviously the scale count top of the head shape's very, the body shape's different. Obviously,
Even the venom.
The venom's vastly different.
Massively. I mean, I wouldn't put our Tanzanian puff adders or our Kenyan puff adders in the same boat as our Nigerians. simply the head size and shape is so different. And I mean, seeing Tim's Namibian one, that's an absolute stunner. I've never seen one that looked like that before. And somehow they're all the same species distributed over the whole of Africa. It's coming. They will be split up. They have to be.
Yeah.
They do have to.
Yeah, I can see them being split up. But I say that's probably something we can talk a little bit more if we can get a taxonomist onto the show and onto the podcast. Talk to them a little bit more about these type of things, because obviously they'll have a lot better insight than what we do. So I think we've covered quite a few diverse subjects today, and I think for that, and with it being a first episode, I think an hour or just slightly over an hour this will be, once it's probably cut up, will be quite a good introduction to what we hopefully podcasts will continue to be.
Yeah, definitely.
In future episodes, we do have a few people that are coming onto who have agreed to come onto the podcast and to dial into the podcast, and hopefully we're going to be recording them over the next week or so, so that we can release them for people. We have Ben Owens from Captive and Field Herpetology coming onto the show soon, and he's going to talk about snakebite initiatives and the snakebite work he's currently doing in India, and that'll be quite interesting to actually see the opposite side of the Africa stuff to the India stuff. Obviously, you work closely with the Africa stuff, so it'll be interesting to see what the differences are going on there. We also have Ray Morgan confirmed coming on the show as well to talk about. Again, he's quite heavily involved in the African Snakebite Initiative stuff. Not necessarily the same work that you're doing at LSTM, but some work. He also now lives in Costa Rica, so he's going to talk about some herpafauna of Costa Rica. So obviously Tim will quite enjoy that one, no doubt. And he's also going to talk about the filming and a little bit more about the venom interviews and the filming of the venom interviews and such forth. I think that could be a really interesting podcast as well for people to come on to and listen to as well. And we're going to have a snakebite special where we're going to have a couple of people on the show that have been bitten as well. We're going to get them on as a bit of an open forum. Again, very similar to what we've done today, where we ask questions and allow people to have inputs into those questions, and we have a group conversation around that. And on that episode, I think Graham Skinner has said that he'd like to come on, and also Eric Farr has also said that he would like to come on and talk about his Crotalus cerastes bite. And I think that would be quite interesting to see the difference as well from the being in America to being bitten in Europe as well. I think that would be quite interesting to see the difference. And I also may ask a few people I know in South Africa, somebody I know who's been bitten in South Africa, to come onto the show as well on the same day. So maybe we can get a little bit of a triangle going with regards to difference in snakebite care in different localities around where you about where you get bitten.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to hear.
And I think that'd be quite interesting. And I know obviously Eric Farr obviously he's quite famous. Yeah, he's quite a popular figure. What we would call in the UK as Marmite. You either love him or you hate him. Do an episode also on how people have come into the hobby and how people who don't have license or don't have a permit right now are going to come on and talk to us. I think also, I'm just dropping this on them now, and I'm just going to gauge a reaction. Maybe we can do an episode on Hamacatus as well, a little bit more.
We all knew it was coming.
It's just I know a couple of us quite enjoy that as that genus and that species. So,
but Russ, I thought you wanted to have a structure going, like first Ed, then Tim, then me.
Oh, for today's, the structure just went out the window today. Very well, so we'll go in future episodes. There will be a little bit more structure around exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about it, and such forth. So hopefully we can get some more people. I know we are talking to a few taxonomists, a few other people involved in the venom industry, in the academic side of venom research, and also in the venom industry as well, of obviously milking snakes for anti-venom and such forth as well, to come onto the show to talk about this. So hopefully in the next couple of days we can start to reveal a few more details on who will be coming on the show in the next couple of weeks. So I'd just like to thank the other hosts of the show today. So I'd like to thank Ed, Nick and Tim, and also I'd like to say a big thank you from myself. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and please share and like the page and such forth, and hopefully you will join in future episodes also. Thank you very much. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Ross Deacon from Word on the Snakebite podcast. I'd just like to take this opportunity to apologise for the quality in parts of this recording. Thank you very much for listening. Bye.